Hello and welcome to our second Teacher PD, presented by the Human Rights Arts and Film Festival and ACME. My name's Kate Fakay and I'm a screen educator. I work with both organisations. I'm pleased to introduce to you our guests today. We have Kylie Smith, who's the Senior Advisor from the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission. Welcome, Kylie.
Thanks for having me.
And also Lara McKinley, Senior Content Coordinator in the Faculty of Education at Monash University. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
I'm super happy to be here.
This session is designed to complement the resources that we've put online for you on the HRAFF website, including a lesson plan and 2 short films which are available for your use in the classroom. Feel free to use part or both, it's up to you. This lesson plan, The Rights of the Child, has been broken into 2 parts. The first part for primary is for years 5 to 6, and the second part is for years 7 to 10 for secondary. Each lesson includes a short film that helps students understand 3 basic things. Those 3 ideas include that children have rights, they're considered universal and protected by law, that with rights comes responsibilities, that there are ways we can promote children's rights and foster greater empathy in our community. So we'll start with a few questions for you, Kylie, just so that we can understand some of the legal frameworks that we're referring to. So Kylie, we have a range of treaties and charters that protect human rights globally. So why do we need the UN Convention for the Rights of the Child?
In 1948, there was the enactment of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Following that convention, there are a number of other treaties and conventions that were designed to give greater specificity to the rights that we were trying to protect and also to focus in on the people that were most vulnerable to their human rights being breached. And then in 1990, we had the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that convention was enacted to recognise the particular special place that children have in the international human rights system, deserving of our special protection because of their age, because of their physical and psychological and emotional level of development, and also because they are particularly vulnerable. It has 54 articles and it protects all children up until the age of 18 all across the world, and it sets out what particular governments need to do to ensure that happens. The rights included come around their right to life, their survival, their development, their protection from violence, abuse and neglect and torture, that they have an education that enables them to be the best people that they can be, and that they have the right to their opinions.
Our federal discrimination laws protect a number of these rights, and we also have the National Children's Commissioner, Megan Mitchell, who works with the Australian Human Rights Commission to monitor and protect children's rights federally. But Kylie, you work with the Victorian Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission, so can you tell us a little bit about our State Charter for Human Rights and Responsibilities from 2006, and how do they protect the rights of the child, and why do we need a state charter as well?
Australia doesn't have a federal Bill of Rights and it doesn't guarantee any protections in our Constitution, and Australia is the only liberal democracy for whom that is true. Many people argue that there should be a Bill of Rights and some constitutional protection for people in Australia because that would both strengthen the existing laws and also ensure that where new laws are enacted that they are complying with human rights principles. The Victorian Parliament in 2006 enacted the Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities, and it was the first state to have done so. The ACT have a Human Rights Act, which it enacted in 2004, and just this year Queensland brought its Human Rights Act into that jurisdiction. So that means then both those 2 states and at the ACT have the strongest human rights protections in Australia. That means that Victoria, Queensland and the ACT have, along with its other legislative protections, the most robust fabric of protections for children and young people.
At the Human Rights Arts and Film Festival, we champion film as a way to personalise human rights, and we understand that for students, putting a story to an idea can be a really great way into understanding human rights. So now we might talk a little bit about Ali and the Long Journey to Australia, which is a short animation and one that we've recommended for primary, years 5 and 6.
We go to the park and all play hide and seek. I find the best hiding spot. I am still hiding when I hear a loud bang. I hear Fatima crying. I am as quiet as a mouse. I do not want to move. The bomb has hit at home. My bedroom wall is broken. Father wants to get our money and important papers. I want my soccer ball. Mother pulled us away. We must go. We go to our cousin's house. I see men coming to the door. They ask for my father. He says he's not going with them. They ask for me. Father says they cannot have me. He gives us a kiss and goes. Mother says we cannot wait for father. We go to the sea and wait in a line for a long time.
It's a stop-motion animation based on a book of the same name and is written and illustrated by Noble Park Primary School students who all have refugee backgrounds. The film tells the story of a fictional character, Ali, as he and his family are displaced by war and then try to make a life in Australia as refugees. And finally, they're reunited with Ali's father. The story connects with a number of child's rights from the UN Convention. Articles 9, 10, 22, 28 and 38 include the right to family, education, protection from war zones and the right to remain with their parents. Ali and the Long Journey to Australia is based on the book by the same name, which resulted on a collaboration between the school and Monash University. We're lucky enough to have some of the team behind the book and the animation with us today. I'd like to ask a question of Mervi Kaukko, who's the researcher from Monash and Tampere Universities. Mervi, you were investigating what helps refugee students be successful at school. Can you tell us briefly about your research findings and how that led to the book?
The research we did at Noble Park Primary School, in particular in Australia, showed that if the conditions are right and if the school and teachers and the leaders have enough understanding of the settlement process of children from refugee backgrounds, things can go well for refugee background students. And the idea for this book came from one of the students I interviewed, and she was telling me about her school journey and how much she loved going to school and how she did all these things that she enjoyed at school and how she had learned all new things. And she asked me who is going to hear these stories. And I told her a little bit about academic publishing, how I'm going to write a research report, and that's going to go to other researchers who do more research. And she wasn't happy with this answer. She said in the end of the very long interview that wouldn't it be nice if more people would hear these stories? Things can go well, and that school is actually pretty nice.
Mervi, I'm interested to know how much time did you spend with the students during your research and how much of their stories are reflected in the Ali and the Long Journey to Australia animation?
So I met with 13 students about once a week after the field work, and we did something called story crafting. And the idea of story crafting is to create space for children to tell their stories and for adults to listen and hear those stories. So the child's job is to tell the story as freely as possible, and the adult job is to listen and document and edit the story. And that actually links with Article 12 on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child as well, and the right to be heard. So we met once a week with a group of kids who wanted to be part of this book project, and they were telling a story that was a combination of fact and fiction. They came up with the story of Ali, which has elements of their real stories, but as it is a combination of 13 kids' stories and a lot of fiction as well, it's nobody's real story. But I think the spirit behind the story is real, and many of the events and characters in the story are also real from these children's lives.
David, you're the principal at Noble Park Primary School. Can you tell us a little bit about the role that the book and the animation have played at the school, student learning and in the community?
Well, I guess we'd start by saying that 90% of our students approximately are from a non-English speaking background, and 25% of those students are from a refugee or asylum seeker background. And of course, a number of our students come from their second generation children from families that have had a refugee background. So it's something that permeates right throughout our school. The research sounded to us like a really playful approach to the research and really appealed to us in terms of it being authentic and relational. And so we were engaged in that immediately. The making of the book and then the subsequent animation, I think, number one, for the students who were directly involved in it, it developed lots and lots of literacy skills and the opportunity to develop their artistic skills within that process. So for them, it was a lot of fun. Some of the spin-offs from it, of course, were many people contacted the school to find out, what we were doing in terms of the things that we did to support refugee students. So that was great to share the learning that we'd had over many years about working with those students. In terms of it being used in our reading program and the student learning impacts, that's been of great value to us. It's great that children are reading their own stories or reading the stories of their peers. It certainly helps for that relatability of it, and it creates a great opportunity for discussion.
So, Lara, you produced the stop motion animation. Can you tell us why you wanted to make the stop motion animation out of the film and what sort of audience you've reached with it?
Well, as soon as I read the book, I thought this needs to be a short film because all the elements were there. So the beautiful illustrations were there, the clay plasticine figures were there, and it was just about amplifying that work that had already been done and using a little bit of technology and a little bit of Monash's budget to be able to kind of put it out in the world in a bigger way. Refugee Week was coming up, and so we thought it would be a really nice way for our research to give back to the community and give back to Noble Park Primary School and the kids who took part in that research. So what we needed to do is get all the illustrations scanned and into JPEG form and send the figures across to our animator, Clem Stomation, and he then spent quite a number of weeks putting together the film. So 2,500 pictures were taken, and he just moved them little bit by little bit by little bit in these tiny little movements that actually created motion within the film, which is how stop motion works. And I also worked with a co-producer, Rodney Decker, who put the film together with music. He added the sound effects that you hear. So when the chicken appears in the film, you actually hear the sound of a chicken. And that really brought the film to life. And so from there, we worked with a lot of different organisations and encouraged them to share the story that when we released it. So overall, about 300,000 people have watched the film. And we were really proud to share that on Refugee Week because it really was celebrating the strengths that refugees are bringing to school and really backing up the research and the work that we're looking at doing to help change that conversation.
Ollie and the long journey to Australia. My name's Ollie. I am 10 years old. I live with my mother, father and little sister Fatima. My sister is just 5. She's not big like me.
So, Lara, can you tell us how much involvement did the students have in the making of the film?
So we already had the story that they had written, and what we did is we just edited that down because on film you can't have really long stories because people stop watching, particularly on social media. So we knew we had to keep it under about 3 minutes. So we edited down the words, but we're really conscious that we wanted to include all of the illustrations and all of the figurines that had been made as part of the book. One of the creators of the book, Nathan, also did the voiceover for the film. So we went out to the school and recorded that on a big microphone for him. He was very cool. He did it in 2 takes. It was amazing. And we really knew that we wanted to have that voice in there. This wasn't our story. We were just helping put it out into the world in a different way.
Coming to another country, and it's really hard.
I thought no one would really notice it, but I was wrong. It means the world to me, because everyone can understand how I feel and how everyone else feels.
So, David, tell us, how did the kids react when they saw the finished film?
From the point of view of the students, I think initially it was like it was a bit of a shock. You know, here we are. This is the work that we've done, and I think they were amazed that something like that could be produced. You know, we kept calling them movie stars and, you know, producers, and, you know, they'd already been authors, and here they were. Now they'd taken another step, so they were sort of living the dream. So look, we celebrated it to the hilt, and as you said, we showed it myriad times, and of course I was sharing it with colleagues and receiving plaudits from them. I did nothing, but I was just here, you know, cheering from the sidelines. But it was a wonderful thing for all of us, I think.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the second film that we've chosen for secondary years 7 to 10. This Is Yarra is a documentary. It's a short documentary that follows the story of Riyad Aden and Deng Dut from the Yarra Wild Beasts, which is a South Sudanese basketball team, as they prepare for the National Basketball Association tournament with the hope that they'll take home their first trophy for the junior team.
Some of my friends without basketball, they'll be in the streets right now. Basketball has made them have a purpose of who they are, let them know that they are something in this world. They're not just some kid that's walking around the street and he's not gonna make a change in the world. Like, basketball makes people feel like I can actually do something with my life. I can make a change.
In This Is Yarra, the founder of the team talks about the importance of the cultural practice of gathering, and he says it's really important for kids to be able to see people of their own background in the road to developing themselves in order to attend university and to develop a career. Kylie, can we just talk a little bit about how the Australian media have portrayed Sudanese youth? It's been quite a negative sort of light, hasn't it?
We've seen the effect of racially divisive media portrayals and commentary from politicians a number of times over the last decade or so, and the effects that has for people in the community. There are a number of studies in the US and elsewhere that show us that where there are negative reports, there's a correlation with the experiences of racism in the community. In 2018, and you might remember at the time, there was a spate of media reporting along the lines of people were unsafe to go outside dining in Melbourne, and there was African gangs attacking people and a state of lawlessness. We know that obviously to be a furphy and often, absolutely untrue. At that time, the Commission received a 34% increase in its inquiries around race discrimination and 74% increase in formal complaints. The nature of those complaints were things like young girls being spat on because of their cultural background. We heard a number of people call in saying that they had either lost their employment because of a contention that they were part of an African gang, or that they couldn't get employment for the same reason, and a number of complaints related to the experience of harassment on the basis of people's cultural background. We know that discrimination is very harmful. It's harmful for the individuals who experience it, it is harmful for communities, and it is harmful for all of us who live in society, because it means that no one's actually living in a place that's free from discrimination and where they can actively participate in public life in a healthy and safe way.
So Kylie, in This Is Yarra, the kids talk a lot about how much their mothers have given up to come to Australia to give them a better life. But the coach also talks about how 90% of the kids are getting an education to feed themselves and how they're doing it on their own. Can you talk a little bit about how important community events and sporting institutions like this are to give kids like this, refugee children, a place to connect with each other?
Our experience in consulting with a number of communities across Victoria is that sporting clubs, community organisations and indeed schools are vitally important to enhance a sense of connectedness for children and young people to ensure that their growth is being looked after and that they have the opportunities to thrive and to be their best selves. So families are obviously crucial, but where they come to a society that really is committed to ensuring non-discrimination, that's where people can really thrive and do the best that they can. And sport is one of those really wonderful silver bullets about how people get connected. And so I love this film. I think this film shows such strength of both the individuals but also the coach and the fan base, and the shots around the young people's families are really heartening, because you sort of see actually how hard it is for a number of those, particularly mothers, and that their children are still thriving under those circumstances. So I agree with what was said earlier about a strength-based approach to showing these stories is really important.
In the lesson plan, we've recommended an activity that asks the students to create their own event which promotes children's rights within the school and their local community. So Kylie, can you just tell us a little bit about how the Charter in Victoria applies in schools?
Yep, sure. So there are a number of rights in the Charter that are very specific to school settings. So all children and young people have the right to equality, which includes freedom from discrimination on the basis of their cultural background, their gender, their sexual orientation, their gender identity and their level of ability. And this has real implications for schools with regard to creating education environments that are free from discrimination and that respect and honour the dignity of every single student, regardless of any of those personal circumstances and background. So that means then that schools have obligations to ensure that there are adjustments made, for example, for students with disability so that they can participate in the curriculum and the school environment on equal terms. It means that there needs to be considerations with regard to bathroom choices for gender diverse children and young people, thinking about school camps, thinking about prayer spaces. Those are the things that schools mostly do really well, but the Charter actually really helps schools get clear about what their obligations are and how they can ensure environments that promote and protect the human rights of not just the students, which is obviously their core business, but also the staff and everybody who participates in the school community.
At HRAFF, we understand that talking about human rights can be difficult and can be confronting for some students and lead to differing views and strong opinions. And that's okay, but we encourage you to facilitate these discussions. And to do that, we've provided a resource online called Creating Safe Spaces. Just visit HRAFF, hraff.org.au. Before we go, I'd like to encourage you to visit the ACME website and check out some of the education resources and programs that we run. We work with teachers and students to develop their skills in filmmaking, animation and game development. Just check out acme.net.au. I'd like to say a big thank you to our guests, Kylie and Lara. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks also to Monash University, Noble Park Primary School, Yarra Director Lydia Rui for allowing us to use their films. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank our partners, Gandel Philanthropy, Tyne Reid Foundation, Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission, and of course our presenting partner, ACME. Thanks for joining us and we'll see you next time.